When people think of leading scientists, they often imagine strict rationalists, men and women who rely only on data, evidence, and experiments. Faith in God is often seen as something outside their world. But Francis Collins, one of the most respected scientists alive today, breaks that stereotype. Collins directed the Human Genome Project, one of the greatest scientific achievements of the modern age. Under his leadership, scientists mapped the entire human DNA sequence. This breakthrough has transformed medicine and deepened our understanding of life itself. Yet despite living in the world of molecules, genes, and numbers, Collins came to a startling conclusion. Science, far from disproving God, pointed him toward belief. And not just belief in a creator, but trust in Jesus Christ. His journey is not one of blind faith. It is a story of wrestling with deep questions. Questions about the universe, morality, and human purpose. This video explores the reasons that convinced Collins, a man of science, to put his faith in Jesus. From atheism to searching, Collins did not grow up a believer. As a young man, he leaned toward atheism. It seemed to him the most rational choice. God felt unnecessary in a world explained by physics, chemistry, and biology. But as time went on, he found cracks in that view. Atheism, he realized, could not give solid answers to the biggest questions. Questions like, why is there something instead of nothing? Why does the universe seem so perfectly ordered? Why do humans have a moral sense of right and wrong? Collins began to search. He discovered that the evidence for God, while not mathematical proof, was strong and worth serious attention. The universe had a beginning. One fact struck him early. The universe had a beginning. Scientists now agree that everything began about 13.7 billion years ago with the Big Bang. Before that, there was nothing. Then suddenly, space, time, and matter came into existence. Science can explain what happened after the Big Bang. It can measure how galaxies continue to expand. It can detect the faint radiation that remains from that first explosion. But it cannot explain why the universe began in the first place. Nature cannot create itself. For Collins, this raised a serious question. If nature cannot explain its own origin, what caused it? The most reasonable answer was a supernatural cause. Something outside time and space. Something powerful enough to bring the universe into being. Fine-tuning and the fragility of life. Collins then looked at how the universe works. The laws of physics are not random. They contain constants like the strength of gravity and the speed of light that allow the universe to exist as it does. If gravity were just slightly weaker, galaxies and stars would never have formed. If it were slightly stronger, the universe would have collapsed back in on itself long before life appeared. The same is true of many other physical constants. They sit on a razor's edge of balance. Change them even slightly, and life becomes impossible. Some scientists suggest that our universe is just one of many, each with different constants. But there is no evidence for this. Others say one day we might discover that the constants had to be this way. Collins found both options unconvincing. The simplest explanation, he argued, is that the universe was designed with purpose, that someone set the dials to the exact values needed for life. For him, the best answer was God. The moral law. Science explains much about the physical world, but it struggles to explain morality. Why do humans, unlike other animals, feel a sense of right and wrong? Why do we admire acts of sacrifice that bring no personal benefit? Collins found that C.S. Lewis is helpful here. Lewis described a moral law as a universal sense of duty written into human hearts. We know we should do good, even though we often fail. When we fail, we make excuses, which shows we still believe the standard is real. Evolution can explain kindness toward family, since they share our DNA. It can explain helping others in the hope they will help us in return. But it cannot fully explain acts of radical altruism. Collins gave the example of Wesley Autry, a construction worker in New York. One day, Autry saw a man collapse onto subway tracks as a train approached. With no time to think, he jumped down and shielded the man with his own body. The train passed over them, and both survived. Autry risked his life for a stranger. Such acts, Collins argued, go beyond survival instincts. They point to a higher law that comes from beyond ourselves, a personal struggle. By this point, Collins was convinced that belief in God was reasonable. But a new problem appeared. If God is real, holy, and good, then where did that leave him? He saw his own failures to live up to the moral law. No matter how much he tried to excuse himself, the sense of guilt remained. Collins began to read the world's religions. He found many similarities among them, especially the great monotheistic faiths. But one stood out. Christianity spoke directly to his struggle. Meeting Jesus. In Christianity, Collins discovered a solution to the problem of human failure. At the heart of the faith is Jesus Christ, who claimed not only to know God, but to be God. Even more, Jesus offered himself as a bridge between sinful humanity and a perfect God. Collins once thought the idea of Jesus dying for sins was nonsense, but as he studied, it began to make sense. Jesus, the wounded healer, suffered and died to heal the brokenness of humanity. Passages like John 3, verse 16, which says God gave his only Son so people could have eternal life, suddenly had weight. The words of prophet Isaiah, written centuries before Jesus, spoke of someone wounded for the sins of others. Collins saw in these verses a picture of Jesus that connected both heart and mind. A scientist's faith. Collins did not come to faith quickly. It took years of questioning, reading, and wrestling. But the more he explored, the more he realized that Christianity offered a coherent explanation for the universe, morality, and the human condition. Science showed him the beauty and order of creation. Faith showed him the purpose and meaning behind it. For Collins, believing in Jesus was not abandoning reason. It was following the evidence to where it led.